You already know they can search your bag, but most people have no idea that when you cross a US border, an officer can also pick up your phone, scroll through your photos, read your texts, and go through your apps without a warrant, and in most cases, without even needing a reason. This isn't a rumor or something scraped off social media. It's real. It's current US policy, and it applies to citizens, green card holders, and visitors alike. So before your next trip, there are 5 specific things sitting on your phone right now that could turn a routine border crossing into a very long, very uncomfortable conversation. Let's start with number 5. A quick but important clarification before we start. Before we dive in, let's clear up something a lot of videos on this topic get wrong. This is not about the TSA checkpoint where you take off your shoes and walk through a metal detector before a domestic flight. TSA does not go through the contents of your phone. What we're talking about here is US Customs and Border Protection, or CBP, the agency that processes you when you're entering or re-entering the United States from another country, whether that's at an international airport terminal, a land crossing, or a seaport. That distinction matters because it changes when this actually applies to you. It's relevant on international trips, not your average domestic flight to visit family. With that out of the way, let's get into it. 5. Sensitive financial and work documents. Number 5 on our list is anything tied to your finances or your job that you wouldn't want a stranger flipping through. Bank statements, screenshots of account balances, tax documents, client contracts, confidential work files, or anything covered by a non-disclosure agreement. Here's why this matters more than people think. Under CBP's directive, officers conducting what's called a basic search, meaning they manually scroll through your device without connecting it to any external equipment, can do so without needing any suspicion at all. That means if you've got a PDF of last year's tax return, a screenshot of your company's unreleased product roadmap, or a client's confidential financial data sitting in your downloads folder or email app, it is technically viewable during a routine basic search, the same category of search that applies to the vast majority of travelers who get flagged. Now, to be clear, this is genuinely rare. CBP's own data shows searches happen to a tiny fraction of travelers, well under 1% of everyone who crosses the border in a given year. But if you happen to be one of the people selected, or if something else on your trip raises a flag, having sensitive business or financial documents sitting in plain sight on your phone is a real professional and personal liability. This is especially true for people who travel internationally for work, carrying proprietary information, client data, or anything covered by confidentiality agreements. Several major law firms have actually started advising traveling employees to use separate clean devices for exactly this reason, stripped of sensitive corporate data before crossing any border. The practical fix here isn't necessarily deleting these files forever. It's making sure they're not sitting locally on the device you're traveling with. Move them to encrypted cloud storage before your trip, and make sure you're logged out of that cloud storage on your phone, because here's an important detail. CBP's search authority is generally limited to what is physically stored on your device. An officer flipping through your phone at the border cannot reach into your Dropbox, iCloud, or Google Drive account unless that content has already been downloaded and is sitting locally on the phone itself. That's a meaningful boundary, and it's exactly why clearing local copies of sensitive financial or work material before you fly is such a smart, simple habit to build. That practical, professional risk is exactly why it earns the number 5 spot. 4. Old arguments, screenshots, and messages you forgot about. Number 4 is something almost nobody thinks to clean up. The years of accumulated text threads, old screenshots, and saved messages sitting in your phone that you completely forgot existed. Think about how long you've had your current phone number, or how far back your message history goes if you've been backing up and restoring the same conversations across multiple devices for years. Buried in there could be an old argument with an ex, a heated political rant you sent a friend in a moment of frustration, an old joke that reads badly out of context, or a screenshot someone sent you that you never bothered to delete. None of this is illegal. None of it is even necessarily embarrassing on its own. But during a basic manual search, an officer is simply scrolling through what's on your screen, and old messages can absolutely come up, especially if a search extends into your messaging apps. This matters more right now than it might have a few years ago, because CBP's most recent directive, updated at the start of 2026, expanded the stated reasons an advanced or deeper search might be triggered, adding categories of concern beyond the traditional focus on terrorism and smuggling. While a basic manual scroll doesn't require any suspicion in the first place, context absolutely can shape how an interaction at the border unfolds, and old messages taken out of context are exactly the kind of thing that can turn a 2-minute conversation into a much longer one, particularly for non-citizens and visa holders, for whom the stakes of a prolonged secondary inspection are meaningfully higher than they are for US citizens. The fix here is less about paranoia and more about basic digital housekeeping that most of us should be doing anyway. Before an international trip, it's worth scrolling back through old conversations and deleting threads you no longer need, clearing out random saved screenshots, and generally not carrying 5 years of digital baggage, pun very much intended, into a 5-minute interaction with a federal officer. That combination of easy avoidability and real potential for an awkward, drawn-out conversation is exactly why old messages and screenshots land at number 4. 3. Photos and videos you wouldn't want a stranger seeing. Sliding into number 3, we've got the category that probably makes the most people wince just thinking about it. The photos and videos sitting in your camera roll that you would never want a random stranger scrolling through. Everybody's camera roll has this stuff somewhere. Personal, intimate photos. Videos from a wild night out. Screenshots from a private conversation. Pictures you meant to delete months ago and simply never got around to. None of this is anyone's business. And for the overwhelming majority of travelers, it stays exactly that way. But the reality of a basic device search is that an officer reviewing your phone can scroll through your camera roll the same way they'd flip through printed photos in your suitcase, since courts have generally treated a phone's contents as an extension of the belongings you're carrying across the border. This is one of those situations where the odds of it happening to you personally are genuinely low. CBP's own published numbers show that out of hundreds of millions of travelers processed each year, only a small fraction have their devices searched at all. But unlikely is not the same as impossible. And unlike a suitcase, most of us carry our entire visual history in our pocket without a second thought. A locked phone doesn't fully solve this either, since you don't have an unconditional right to keep it locked during a basic search without consequences. Non-citizens can be refused entry for declining to unlock a device, and even US citizens, who cannot be denied re-entry for refusing, can still face a delayed inspection or a temporarily confiscated phone while officers pursue other options. The simplest fix is one most people can do in about 10 minutes before any international trip. Go through your camera roll and move anything you wouldn't want a stranger to see into a locked, hidden folder within a secure app. Or better yet, offload it to encrypted cloud storage and remove the local copies from your phone entirely before you travel. It costs you nothing to be a little more deliberate about what's sitting on your device the day you fly, and it removes an entire category of potential embarrassment from the equation. That combination of universal relevance and genuine personal discomfort is exactly why this one earns the number 3 spot. 2. Anything related to immigration status, past travel, or legal history. Number 2 is a category that matters enormously for a specific group of travelers, even though it may not apply to everyone watching this. Anything on your phone connected to immigration paperwork, past visa applications, prior legal issues, or detailed records of previous international travel. Here's why this one carries real weight. CBP officers are not just looking at your phone in isolation, they're often using it, alongside your travel documents and prior entry records, to build a picture of who you are and why you're entering the country. For visa holders, green card holders, and anyone with a more complicated immigration history, screenshots of old visa denials, half-finished immigration forms, messages discussing legal proceedings, or photos documenting a previous overstay can all become relevant talking points during an inspection, particularly under the expanded national security categories introduced in CBP's most recent directive update. Immigration attorneys have specifically flagged this as an area worth extra caution, since for non-citizens, the consequences of a prolonged secondary inspection can extend well beyond an inconvenient delay and into actual questions about admissibility. To be clear, this is not about hiding anything from the government or suggesting you do anything deceptive. Your official paperwork and legal status are handled through proper immigration channels, not through what happens to be sitting in your notes app or camera roll. This is purely about basic organization and reducing unnecessary confusion. Having a phone cluttered with old, outdated, or half-finished immigration-related documents, screenshots of correspondence with an old attorney, or informal notes about a legal situation can create confusion or invite unnecessary follow-up questions during what should be a routine interaction, simply because it gives an officer more loose threads to ask about. If this applies to you, the smartest move is straightforward. Keep your current, valid, up-to-date documents easily accessible, whether physically or in a clearly organized folder, and clear out old, outdated, or unofficial material. Screenshots, draft messages, informal notes that could create confusion rather than clarity. It's not about anything to hide. It's about not needlessly complicating your own re-entry with clutter that has nothing to do with your actual current status. That real practical stakes for a huge number of international travelers is exactly why this one earns the number 2 spot. 1. Apps and data you've forgotten you're still logged into. And here it is, the number 1 thing worth checking before any international trip, because it's the one almost nobody thinks about until it's too late. Every app on your phone that you're still logged into, especially ones tied to cloud storage, social media, and messaging platforms you rarely open anymore. Here's the exact problem. As we mentioned earlier, CBP's authority during a device search is generally limited to what's physically stored on your phone. Officers aren't supposed to reach into your remote cloud accounts. But that boundary only holds if you're actually logged out. If you're still logged into an old cloud backup service, a secondary email account, a messaging app you forgot you had, or a social media account you haven't opened in over a year, all of that becomes reachable the moment your phone is unlocked, because from the device's perspective, it's just another open app displaying its contents on the screen. The distinction between stored locally and accessible through an open, logged-in app is a technical one, but in practice, it means dozens of accounts you've completely forgotten about could still be sitting there, fully open, the moment someone starts scrolling. This is exactly the blind spot that trips people up, because most of us have accumulated years of forgotten logins. An old cloud photo backup from a phone we upgraded from 3 years ago, a secondary messaging app used for one specific trip, a social media account tied to a job you don't even have anymore. None of these are things we actively think about hiding, because we don't even remember they exist. But during a search, I forgot I was logged into that, doesn't undo the fact that it was sitting there, fully visible, the entire time. The fix here is genuinely the single most valuable 10 minutes you can spend before any international trip. Go through your phone's list of installed apps and actively log out of anything you don't need access to during your trip, especially old cloud backup services, secondary email accounts, and any messaging or social platforms you don't use regularly. For accounts you truly don't need at all while traveling, consider temporarily removing the app altogether rather than just logging out, since a removed app can't be casually opened by anyone scrolling through your home screen. This one small habit does more to protect your actual privacy than almost anything else on this list, because it directly restores the boundary CBP's own policy is supposed to respect: genuinely local, on-device data only, nothing more. That outsized impact from such a small, easily overlooked habit is exactly why it takes the number 1 spot. And that's the list. 5 things worth thinking about and cleaning up before your next international trip. To be totally clear, none of this is about doing anything illegal or trying to outsmart law enforcement. It's simply about understanding that a border crossing operates under different rules than everyday life in the US. And that a little bit of basic digital housekeeping, clearing sensitive files, tidying up old messages, and logging out of accounts you've forgotten about, can save you from an awkward, drawn-out conversation over something that had nothing to do with the actual purpose of your trip. If you found this useful, share it with someone who's got an international flight coming up. And if you want more practical, no-nonsense travel and privacy tips like this, go ahead and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.